Sam Altman, previously started Loot, sits on the board of Green Dot.
You can skip my background, let's just talk.
All right, let's do it. Come on, So I want to start off with a question. We're going to do a couple of questions up here and then take some audience questions. So I want to read a quote that you said, and I'm going to ask you to expand on it a little bit. I think you know what it's going to be. The critical point is that you want to do the thing that is most likely to get you on a path to do something great. Like, what does that mean? Like, can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think people always sort of underestimate the path to limits of their careers, and it turns out that like every little thing that you do to change sort of the slope of your career, especially when you're just starting out, like really compounds in a big way. And if you sort of do things that really help in your early or mid or even late 20s, then the stuff that you can do in the rest of your career, it really matters. So getting the trajectory right early, I think is just really important.
And then trajectory, you in your blog you recommend that young people join a company on a breakout trajectory. So like, what does that even look like? What does that mean? Is it a company that our friends have heard of? Is it?
I think the safe bets. It's always funny to me that people can, like engineers or product people can choose companies better than VCs, but they can, and you see this again and again. The best people tend to go join the best companies. But I think what it means, if it's a product that you use every day and that other people are starting to use every day, that's a really good sign. If it's a business that you can understand why it has an obvious network effect, a marketplace that's like sort of at that tipping point. I think Airbnb, I'd say 3 or 4 years ago, it was not, like most of the world did not recognize it as an obvious success. But, young people that were traveling around a lot stayed on Airbnb everywhere. It kept growing, and it was obvious why, like, once this got going, it was going to be this winner-take-all marketplace. But I think this is like really a place to trust your instincts. Don't do something that seems promising that might work in the future. Don't do something that's raised a bunch of money from a VC but has a product that you don't know anybody who uses it. But like, if it's something that you yourself use a lot, that you love and that your friends love and that you think more people are going to use, that's a pretty safe bet.
Do you think starting a company versus joining a company in your 20s? 95.
The two sort of frameworks that I talk to people if someone sits down with me and asks me for sort of career advice. One is like impact maximization, and the other is regret minimization. And on the impact maximization side, I think that sometimes that's joining a company and sometimes that's starting one. If you have the opportunity to go like be an early employee at a company that's just like going crazy and that you believe is the next Facebook or Google, you should definitely go join that company. If you have a startup that's keeping you up at night because you think it could be so great and you're going to regret not working on it, you should do that. So I think it's really hard to like make abstract statements about you should start a company or you should join one. Obviously, I have some bias thinking people should start companies, but not entirely. And there's lots of times where I have told someone to just go join Uber, Airbnb, or whatever.
What are some common mistakes that you're seeing interns or 20-year-olds make?
I think people don't think enough about what they're going to do. So the people are just on this like track, and you're like, I went to this like great high school, and I got into Stanford, and then I got an internship at Uber, and now I'm going to go be a software engineer at Facebook, and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go be a partner in Andreessen Horowitz or whatever people want to do. And here's the mistake that people make there. It looks like it's the same thing, and you're just on this like train stopping at these like prestigious stations, and you've done that and it's worked for you so far, so you keep doing it. And it looks the same. And the mistake is that there is a line at the end of when you're a student and studying, where you go from a net consumer of wealth to a net producer of wealth. And at that time, prestige stops being a good deal. But because it's worked for you all along, and because like, your parents are telling you like, study more, work hard, go to a good college, you think it's gonna keep working. And the trick to like this trajectory of this sort of like high impact, high success career is that eventually you get compensated in terms of satisfaction, money, and everything else for the wealth you produce, not the brand. And so I think that's the mistake. People keep trying to do this thing that's worked. So they go, be an engineer at Google or whatever, because it seems like that's worked before, but it's really a totally different thing.
So one of the questions I've written down sort of relates to that. A lot of interns have, or my friends just don't know what they're passionate about. They've done that with the career path that you just mentioned. They graduate from good school, they've done an internship at a really big company. But what advice do you have for people that are looking for something to assess over?
You know, try a lot of different things. Don't feel like you have to figure it out on day one. You only have to be right once, but you have to be really right that time. And so if it takes you a few years to try different stuff, meet different people, like that's great. And this is the time to do it. I don't think people spend nearly enough time trying to figure out what they're good at and what they like. You know, sometimes you get pulled along right away, and sometimes it takes a while.
Cool. I have one last question, then we're going to open it up to the floor. What's one thing you've learned so far from being president of YC?
Man, it's really hard to pick one. I think one thing that impresses me that I sort of knew, but not as well as I do now, is that how much people can sort of rise up to the occasion. You know, we fund people, and you especially see this with sort of like young people. So we fund 19 and 20-year-olds all the time, and they're so unsure of themselves, and you fund them, and the next day you're like, how is this guy or this woman ever going to run a company? Like, what have they done? They made such a mistake. And then you throw them into the fire, and 3 months later they emerge as like formidable founders. You're like, well, what did you do with the person that was here at the beginning of this program? And it's always amazing how quickly people can improve. And I think this is just a mistake that a lot of people, especially investors, make, is they don't realize how quickly people can become like formidable leaders.
Well, let's take some questions. If you're too afraid to come up and ask me a question, you can text me, and I will ask it for you. I would be texting.
Hi, Sam. My name is Gabriel, and I'm interning with Facebook. In your position, you have a really unique perspective on the future, and I'm wondering that from what you can see, is there a future in which people no longer have to work? And if so, what does that future look like?
Yeah, I mean, that is going to happen. A lot of people have a real problem with this. A lot of people, it's fine with me if there's a world where our tools and our technology have gotten so good, and technology is such a multiplier on the situation you happen to be born into, your skill, everything else, that some people can create 10,000 or 100,000 times more wealth than everybody else. And we as a society just agree that's going to happen. It's been happening for a long time. But like in a wealthy society, like there should be no one like living the way we let people live today. And so, I believe that at some point, some version of wealth redistribution and a basic income will happen. Not everyone needs to create work. Now here's what that bothers people. It's true. 90% of the people, if you just give them enough money to live on, will not do anything that interesting. But some of them will write like the best novels ever, some of them will paint the best paintings ever, some of them will start the next Apple or Google or whatever. And I have no problem with this. I think this is a good investment in society. The hard part about that is that, again, the money doesn't bother me, but I think people derive a lot of satisfaction from work. Even people that claim to hate their jobs, it turns out a lot of their sense of self-worth comes from their job. And so how you replace that, if people don't need to work, that is a much harder problem. That I think is the question that people ignore, that they should think about whenever this debate comes up.
Hi Sam, I'm Hassan. I'm also an intern at Facebook. My question is about the advancing technologies and about what are some actions that like YC and other people are taking to help like people who work on technology which may mature in like 2-3 years or even like 10 years, like quantum computing or new technology in genomics and things like that.
Well, 2 or 3 years, and in fact, even sort of like out to 5 or 7 years, we just fund startups. That works really well. In fact, we funded a quantum computing startup. It's called Rigetti Quantum Computing. It's awesome. So I think most technology on that sort of time frame is best developed in a startup. We funded self-driving car companies, nuclear energy companies. The thing that is harder is when you get out to the 10 to 20 year time frame, startups don't actually work for that. So we are working on something to help that kind of technological development, but not ready to talk about it yet. But it will be cool.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Kelsey. I'm an intern with Crunchbase. So I'm a communications major at the University of Texas in Austin. And you tweeted something really recently in April that I thought was very applicable to the tech startup realm. You were talking about, and I'll just read the tweet. I wish schools would teach people how to communicate clearly. This would probably be more valuable than knowledge in any specific domain. So I'm not going to take that literally or at face value, but could you please describe your why you think communication is valuable, specifically, let's just say in Silicon Valley or San Francisco tech startups?
Yeah, if you think about the #1 job of a CEO, it is basically to be a good communicator. If you think about what you spend your time doing as a CEO, it's getting investors excited about your vision, getting employees excited, employees that you need to recruit, and then ones that you need to retain and get them to work hard and focus in the right direction. Sales, it's basically clear communication. Talking to the press, especially, is clear communication. And so, I don't know, like 80% of your job as a CEO, everyone thinks that CEO sits around and like thinks of like, oh, the strategy for the company. It's maybe 5% of the time, maybe. 80% of the time is communicating that vision to everybody that you interact with. And if you can't do that well, I think it's almost impossible to be a really successful founder. I believe it's actually that important. It just comes up in everything you have to do.
Thank you.
Hey Sam, my name is Parth. I'm an intern at Google. Absolutely loved your course that you talked about at Stanford today. And my question is actually with the tech bubble. So in the news and TechCrunch and other places, you hear a lot about a potential of this being this big tech bubble where it might pop, where you have these different valuations, stuff like that. What are your personal thoughts on that? Do you feel like we're in one? Is it on top, or is that...
This is like a really dumb debate topic, but I'll answer it anyway. We are definitely in an interest rate bubble. I'm very convinced of this. I think in 2008 or 9, short-term Fed rates went to roughly 0%, and they've stayed there for 6 years. This is unprecedented in basically Western history. There was a corporation in Europe, a corporation that issued negative real rate bonds. I couldn't believe it. The question is, what's going on with this, right? Like, why are interest rates 0 and why have they been 0 for so long? In a world where interest rates are 0, like everything else doesn't matter. You can't really have like a, equity to debt, equity to interest rate sort of equation when one of the numbers is 0. So no one knows how to think about this. This is like unprecedented. Great Karl Marx quote: "When the interest rates go to 0, then the capitalists will have run out of ideas." So you can think about what you want to believe there. But I think that is where the bubble is. When that happens, all other assets get overpriced relative to 0% interest rates, and so I'm sure they'll come down. I don't think high-growth tech startups are going to be the first things hit by that, because I don't think people are like trading off buying treasuries or investing in tech startups. VCs love to talk about this. I sort of got tired of hearing about it, so I laid out this little bet on my blog. No one would take it. So all these VCs that are saying there's a bubble, there's a bubble, there's a bubble, I was like, okay, let's put out a little, mathematical definition of what this would mean. Not a single one would take it. So it's not even clear to me that VCs believe we're in a bubble. Not even the ones that say what they think we are, but that's another topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm interning at Quizlet, a couple of blocks from here. I just wanted to ask, because you mentioned it as you were talking, that you were surprised at how quickly people could become formidable leaders. What exactly is it about YC or just stuff in general that can turn something like that?
It's a great question. There's no way I can answer it in like 2 minutes because it takes us 3 months, basically 24 hours a day to teach people. I don't think there's any short answer I can give that would do justice to that question. What I would say is, come apply to YC. you can see how it works. But it's like, it's not any one thing. It's just, it's working with people about how they respond to situations again and again and again. It's, you know, giving them feedback on how they tell their story, how they do sales. But it's so many things, all of which sort of like come together, and out of that noise, people understand just how to be as a leader.
We have time for just a few more questions. So probably the end of this line, that'll be it.
All right, I'll go fast.
I have like 35 on the phone.
Hi, I'm Christopher Gibbons, rising high school senior at Bellman Postgrad in San Jose. Yeah, I was wondering, what is one of the biggest mistakes that young entrepreneurs make when searching for funding from venture capitalists?
The biggest mistake is that founders think, well, two big mistakes. One is that they think investors are going to give them money because they need money. And so like they're like, oh, I need money, let me just go ask for it, someone will give it to it. And that's not how it works. Investors will give you money if they believe you're going to return 100 times that. The other is, well actually, that's like so big I'll emphasize that again. Like, you don't get money from investors just because you need money. I think the other mistake people make is that they assume money is going to solve their problems. You know, I don't have users, no one likes my product, but if I can raise money, then all of this will work. And that never happens.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Dan and Corey. I think I read an article today, it was by Corey, about things you learned from Interpalooza 2014. And one of the things was, if you want something, just ask for it. So here goes. Would you guys give me the honor of taking a selfie with me?
Sure.
I thought he was going to ask for YC accent.
I'm an intern at Pratt Computing. We're a startup. Previously, I co-founded 2 of my own startups. We actually applied to YC twice and got rejected. Now those have both failed, so I'm kind of looking for my next big opportunity. So I have a lot of friends that are co-founders of startups, and I'm wondering, like, basically, two-sided question of, if I'm trying to become a co-founder of an early-stage startup, how do I decide what's the right startup? As in, like, is it the friends that I really know and really passionate about? Is it the really good idea, or is it something else?
You know, the trick about really good startups is people love to trade off these either-ors, and really you need all of them. And you should wait until you get all of them, because startups are really hard no matter what. You may as well give yourself a reasonable chance. But you want a really good idea and really good co-founders that you know really well. And I think you should hold yourselves to all 3 of those.
Thanks.
My name's John, intern at Apple. I've got 2 quick things I want to say. First thing, pretty simple. What books you would recommend, you know, your favorite books and books you recommend to your friends. And second part of the question is, what does it take you to say yes if someone were to ask you to be his or her mentor?
On the books, well, the 3 that I recommended most recently, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, The Molecular Biology of the Cell by a whole bunch of people that are really well known and is a long but great read, and the Constitutional Convention, Notes from James Madison. Those are all pretty good. I try not to mentor people anymore because I don't have enough time to do it right. I believe that if you're going to do that, you really want to be available, and that's like the number one thing to manage from mentors, like available to someone that cares. And I still care, but just have so much stuff going on that I try to instead match up with people that can, really spend like an hour a week or whatever. And I think that's always better.
Hey Sam, I'm Ron. I'm an intern at a startup that does e-commerce called Merchant Payments. So I thought what you said about the trajectory was really interesting. And I thought about something that basically applies to everyone in this room. So most of the people here are interested in entrepreneurship. A lot of the people here are doing software engineering internships. And you said the whole thing about moving along, stopping to take prestigious roles. So how do all of us make like the next step from being, oh, this person knows how to code or knows how to market or knows how to do a specific thing to really like becoming a leader in a certain
Yeah,
space?
that's a great question. And now I was actually going to give a little implicit statement about that, so this is a great thing to end on. Someone in this room, I'm very confident, is going to found a multi-billion-dollar company that will change big way. And 90% of the people in this room will end up with a career that they somewhat regret and wish they had gone in a different way. It doesn't have to be starting a company. Like a high-impact engineering role at a great company will do this, but it's really important not to let yourself off the hook, not to make excuses, but to sort of just like push yourself really hard, like work hard at everything you do, and be really thoughtful about like, I want to do the best at whatever I do, and I want to like move along. You don't want to overplan your career, because then you get to that train station mistake. And like the best careers I've made are ones that I didn't perfectly plan out, but like there was a famous science quote, the harder I work, the luckier I get, or the harder I work, the more opportunities come across my desk. And these are really true. And I think the best way to do this is just like think hard about the things that you believe are going to be big trends in the world that are really going to matter, but aren't yet obvious, and figure out a way to work on those. And I think it's more important to get that right than to get the specific, should I be an engineer or product manager or found a company? At some point, I think you should all consider founding companies. I think in the current world, for right or wrong, the way that many people have the most impact is by running a company. That something about this seems to work better than working in a research lab or whatever. And I would encourage you all to consider that, even if it's not today. But, startups are great. Startups have a huge impact. I think you can, it's remarkable that, 6 years ago, Airbnb was basically this little thing that no one had ever heard of in YC, and now it's spawned this entire sharing economy revolution that is going to still, go a lot further than it is today. It'll just change everything that we consume works. And this was done because someone decided to start a startup. So I would just think about what can you do that has a high impact, and what do you want to do? What are you good at? And if that's starting a company, then go start a company. And there's no need to sort of wait a long time to go do that. The great career mistake people make is not being willing to do what they want to do. It's easier to know what you should go do, and it's harder to sort of take a leap and start that company or join that company or whatever. And so don't let yourself suffer for that. And if you start companies, please come apply to YC. Sorry, there's one more question. We'll do that.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Hi Sam, my name is Josen and I am the CEO of Full Dive. So I came here with all my team there. So I actually took your class last year at Stanford.
Cool, thanks.
So yeah, my question is, if you really believe in your product, but somehow you just find a super big block, that how do you market it? You have a super small product. What is the best way to get it out to people and get people to use it?
Two comments about this. One, make the product better. This is the hard answer no one ever wants to hear. When the product is really good enough, it will find some users. Not a lot, but it will find some. And if some people that you don't know aren't using it and loving it and using it again the next day, you probably want to make the product better. Second is every founder wants to not have to do sales. They just want to I'm going to do this brilliant marketing thing, and I'm going to get this in all these users' hands, and that's going to be awesome. But that almost never happens. Initially, I think startups should be 100% focused on sales, hand-to-hand combat, getting users one at a time, not marketing. You can figure out the growth hacks and the marketing later, but there is no excuse for just going up to people and saying, I want to tell you about this product and why you should use it. Will you use it? And every founder I've ever met pretty much has tried to avoid that, and 98% of the founders end up having to do that. And then things are going, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.